Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 22nd of August, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that a lot of different ways. As we always say, the Alaska Weather Information Line is a great number to have right by your phone, 1-800-472-0391. Program that on your home screen and just leave it right there. And with a few clicks of the keypad, you can get your local forecast anytime you like. You can always find us at weather.gov/Alaska. That's the big web page. If you're on your home computer, that certainly works. But if you're on your mobile device or your tablet, try something, especially in a low bandwidth option. Try mobile.weather.gov. Type in your location, well, let's say Nanwalek, and no problem. There you go. Set that to your home screen, and now it acts like your own personal weather app set for your locations that you care about. If you go back to the main website, mobile.weather.gov, you can set some other locations there fairly easily and have a whole host of places. If you travel around, you'll be able to access that very quickly. If you can't find what you're looking for, whether it's a river forecast, if it's information about fire danger, or if it's simply a question about where to find some tools for aviation weather, let me know. I'm happy to help you and serve you any way I possibly can. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is how you find me. Let's move on to fire danger here. We're just clicking right through everything. Fire danger is high still around the Susitna Valley, the western Kenai, all the way up through the Glen Highway corridor into the Copper River Valley, and also across southwestern Alaska. We don't have fire danger listed now across northern parts of southeast. There are still areas that are fairly dry. However, with added rainfall in the last couple days, things are changing there and improving slowly, but certainly getting wetter as we go. We've also limited fire danger across the interior because of substantial amounts of rain, generally north of the Alaska Range, but south of that, that is certainly not true. And if you look very carefully, you can see very bright red colors here right around the Palmer area and also around the region around Houston to Willow and just to the south in the extreme fire danger category. We know that it has been a very dry summer, and our drought conditions compared to what we've seen in southeast has not been as long-lived. However, we are in drought now, and the drought monitor, a system of measuring how much precipitation we've had over a long period of time, comparing that to seasonal normals or multiple years of normal conditions there, tells us that it has been very dry. You can see the first level of drought here at D0, or abnormally dry. That means things are a little bit below and behind schedule there. And that has covered up all of southeast, and at times it's reached as far north as just about Arctic Village, Fort Yukon, toward Aniak, and just about to Bethel and parts of southwest just a few weeks ago. With recent rains, that's peeled back a little bit, but we're still seeing first level drought, severe drought, and even extreme drought across some parts of Alaska. It's been in southern southeast for weeks, and at least severe drought for months, generally across the southern third of southeast, and for quite a while been affecting hydropower and general drinking conditions there across southern parts of southeast. Now, what we haven't seen until very recently has been this D2 and D3 drought, severe and extreme drought across the Susitna Valley, into the Matanuska Valley, down through Anchorage, and into the Kenai Peninsula. And so when you're looking around going, gosh, the trees are already turning, yeah, well, some of them may start to turn. But what we're certainly seeing is the stress in those trees out there, and the trees are changing colors because things are so dry. You've probably seen it in your lawn and garden. But what we're certainly seeing it as a one-to-one correlation is the wildfire danger that is ongoing into late August now, which is really, really strange. And at least my time here, it has not been the case to ever see August with this high level of fire danger. So we still have very high, if not extreme, fire danger across the Susitna Valley and parts of the western Kenai Peninsula, simply because of this right here, the drought monitor telling us that we are in moderate to severe, if not extreme, drought across a large part of south central and abnormally dry conditions across a large part of southwest. And we're even looking at moderate drought across parts of Kodiak Island. Who'd have thunk this is possible this time of the year? So here we are. You can learn more about the drought monitor anytime you want. The maps are really easy to find. Just go to your favorite search engine. I like Google. Go to drought monitor and hit search, and boom, there you go. There you go. It's from the University of Nebraska and Lincoln, and works with a lot of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration partners around the nation. Here's a look at our satellite picture, and you can see a big spinny thing here in the Gulf. That is low pressure, and that is slinging a lot of wind and a lot of rain out towards southeast. Now, the winds aren't terribly bad. They're at least a decent gale here across the central and the eastern Gulf. It is bringing some much appreciated and much needed rain to central and southern parts of southeast especially. A little bit of a lighter precipitation there as you head up towards Sitka and just about to Yakutat. I don't even think it was raining when I last checked there in the mid-afternoon. Now, a lot of this wind is working its way across the northern Gulf, but it really isn't slinging a whole lot of precipitation there. We are seeing that just outside of Montague Island on our radar system there. And across the interior, a little bit of light rain earlier this afternoon. That is this wave of cloud cover that's stretching to the east and south and gradually peeling away from the middle Tanana Valley. A careful eye would have caught that northerly push of cloud cover moving in across the north slope. Let's look at that with visible satellite. And you can see there is a boundary right about here. Watch one more time, and as that drifts southward, that will be our next weather maker that should quickly move into the interior as we head into tonight and into tomorrow. If you look out west, though, quite a bit of sunshine, maybe some areas of fog across the southern Bering Sea and the central and northern sections of the Bering there. Across the central and western chain, quite a bit of cloud cover and some breaks, but we have had some areas of dense fog out around Akutan and out toward Unalaska earlier today. Hopefully that didn't slow you down too much. Here's a look at the weather map, and low pressure sits in the central Gulf at 984 millibars. Man, oh man, if that was just a little bit further to the west by a couple hundred miles, that would push rain into south central, but it has not happened, and it is sitting just out of reach of south central at this point, gradually drifting eastward, slinging rain up across most of the Panhandle. Not everybody got rain out of this today, but quite a few locations there across southeast were getting wet. High pressure sitting up across the northern parts of Yukon, 1,011 millibars, and that frontal boundary draped across the interior is just kind of a weak disturbance. We've got another one that's dropping south tonight, and that will quickly make its way over the Brooks Range. Now, if you haven't heard already, many locations there around the Brooks Range, up around 4,000 feet or so, could pick up a couple inches of snow, maybe as much as 4. Most locations are not going to see measurable precipitation where you live, but along and generally east of the highway, the Dalton Highway, you're probably looking at least a couple inches of snow, maybe a little bit more, pushing 4 inches there, and generally north and west of Arctic Village, and again east of the Dalton Highway. So be prepared for at least a little early taste of fall. Should be a wet snow there. Areas of light rain and fog across the north and western coast. You can see widespread fog across the Bering Sea, and light rain and drizzle generally south and along the chain, with low pressure really here in the Gulf still driving the weather picture and helping to pull in that cooler air. We've got our squiggly line smokestack there right around the Kenai Peninsula. That is Swan Lake smoke. That will be a factor in our forecast for the next couple days. I took it out here so you can see what's coming at us, though. A few showers or even a storm possible out across some of our western high terrain. And out across the east, that cool air is dropping southward here as we get into Friday. Low pressure sitting across the eastern Gulf will come up a little bit, so not quite as powerful as it once was earlier today. By tomorrow afternoon, sitting just west of Sitka, just south of Gustavus, and pushing that front through the region. So gales and some blustery conditions will continue. Probably won't be any stronger than gales out across the open water, and at least many small crafts across the interior of southeast. As this front moves across, it's going to settle up across the Alaska Range. Another disturbance comes in behind it. That will increase the higher surf conditions there across some of our northern coastal areas there. Elevated surf, let's call it. Nothing severe or advisory or warning level just yet, but you are going to see the surf come up a little bit as we get into Friday. High pressure sits out to the west, drifts a little bit further south by Saturday, pushing in a northerly flow across the west coast, areas of light rain and drizzle and fog all the way up across the north slope. Here comes another disturbance working its way across the north slope communities. That will continue that cool weather push, but it doesn't look like we're in for a whole lot of really cold weather, so not a big surge of snow coming across the Brooks Range as we see it right now. Low pressure also drapes the disturbance out all the way from about Shelikof Strait to the northern parts of the Yukon, and to the south of that, showers continue with that onshore flow into southeast. Still looks pretty dry around south central. Most of the areas will be looking at maybe a few more clouds and some breezes as this wave of low pressure moves over. The best chance we have right now around Saturday for seeing any precipitation as this comes through is probably up around the Talkeetnas. And hopefully that changes and improves for us a little bit more. Now, as we go ahead in the next couple days, our next best chance for precipitation probably creeps our way as we head into Monday for south central. So hopefully that will stay on track. As we look at low temperatures across the region for southeast, overnight low temperatures in the 40s and 50s there. South central in the Kenai Peninsula region, Matanuska and Susitna Valleys and Anchorage, looking at temps in the lower to mid 40s. Southwest, upper 40s and lower 50s. That extends all the way into the Aleutians. 46 around St. Paul and St. George, 44 in Nome, and upper 30s to about 40 for the Beaufort Seacoast. Arctic Village and AKwx Pass at or just below freezing overnight, with Fairbanks holding in the 40s. A high there of 60 tomorrow, southeast in the mid to upper 50s, south central upper 50s to even upper 60s as you push that into southwestern Alaska and Bristol Bay. Kodiak 67, Nome looking at 53, Galena 57, Kotzebue 58, Utqiagvik 44 and 41 in Kaktovik, Fort Yukon 57. Overnight lows back below freezing for Arctic Village and AKwx Pass. You can see a little milder conditions in the morning for the Beaufort Seacoast and the Chukchi. Southwest, upper 40s there. King Salmon and Dillingham in the mid 40s. Southeast and the capital city in the lower to mid 50s. Prince William Sound in the mid 40s there, and 54 in Kodiak. Looks like about 41 in Fairbanks, with high temperatures back in the 50s and 60s for most of the interior. Southwest all the way up toward King Salmon and McGrath. You're looking at 50s and 60s there. 64 in Kodiak, 50s for Utqiagvik, 54 in St. Paul, out around Sitka, 57 degrees, and just about 60 around Ketchikan and Annette, 46 in Utqiagvik, and 53 in Nome. A quick check of our climate trends as we head toward the 5th of September. Cooler than normal conditions expected across the north and east, and looking warmer than normal across southwest and southeastern Alaska. Precipitation-wise, slightly wetter than normal.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to aviation concerns now. IFR, of course, showing in red here, will continue to linger across the Bering and most of the Aleutian chain, across the north slopes of the Brooks Range and into the Beaufort Seacoast, and across southeastern Alaska, with MVFR fairly widespread across the inside passage, wrapping into Shelikof Strait and kind of flirting with some of our southwestern capes all the way into the Yukon Delta and generally north through the Bering Strait and over St. Lawrence Island tomorrow morning, and covering up a lot more of the Brooks Range. Obviously, we're still going to have smoke issues around the Kenai Peninsula, especially on the western side of the Kenai Mountains and into the Susitna Valley. MVFR will linger across the northern mountains. No big significant change for smoke as we go through the rest of your Friday and really on into Saturday at this point. IFR will continue pressing across the outer coast of central and southern parts of southeast. MVFR remains widespread and covers up Chilkoot and White Pass and reaches up toward Yakutat. Around Shelikof Strait and the western capes all the way through Bering Strait and the Beaufort Seacoast, MVFR will linger there with no big change in IFR. It does seem to move in and out of St. Paul and St. George as we go from Friday night into Saturday, so maybe some windows there that you can work through a little bit on your Friday. IFR will also sneak up into the Bristol Bay region, especially up toward King Salmon and Dillingham. And across the outer coast, IFR lingers there, just sneaking up into Clarence Strait. No big change in the smoke. And IFR up across Utqiagvik all the way east toward Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse. And it will linger there through Saturday afternoon. But obviously you can see most of the interior is looking at VFR conditions through your Saturday. No big changes out in the west. In fact, a little bit drier air sneaks out past Nunivak Island and into parts of southwest, with IFR lingering around Adak and Atka. And marginal conditions will be the rule now for the central and eastern Gulf as we get into Saturday afternoon. No IFR expected across parts of southeast for Saturday. Here's a look at your pass conditions now for Friday. AKwx and Adigan Pass are both expected to see some improvements from marginal conditions onward toward VFR as we go throughout your day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass expected to be VFR for all of your Friday. Rainy Pass may linger at marginal conditions through mid-morning and then gradually see some improvement throughout the afternoon. Windy Pass will likely see similar conditions as we go throughout your day, with heading toward VFR as we get into the afternoon. Same goes for Isabel Pass there. And Mentastet Pass looks pretty good. Visual flight rule expected for most of your Friday there as you go further south into Tanita Pass. Smoke may be in the region, but we expect generally VFR conditions to be the rule. And Portage Pass also looking pretty good. Chilkoot and White Pass are expected to be listed as marginal as we go through your Friday now. The freezing levels indicate that surge of cooler air is lingering generally north of the Brooks Range. Levels there from 2,000 feet and lower toward the surface freezing line right there in view. Is showing up in white. As you look out to the west, the 6,000-foot line is sitting out across the Chukchi coast and down toward Nunivak Island. As we continue to see that cooler air trying to work its way further and further south, it does look like it kind of comes to a stop there around the Alaska Range. South of that, we don't find the 8,000-foot line until we get out over the Gulf of Alaska and south of the Aleutian Chain and generally west of Shemya. Out across southeast, levels range between about 6,000 and 8,000 feet. As you look at your icing potential, it's still pretty high up there, but we are seeing signs of that dropping down, of course, with new snow up across areas around Chandelar. Levels are running between about 4,000 and 8,000 feet up across the north. Most of that is going to be pretty hit and miss across the north. The main surge of moisture that could support some icing is going to be about 8,000 to 10,000 feet across the eastern interior, across the southern interior, and across southwestern Alaska. Most of that, again, is going to be too high to have any significant issues for our general aviation community. Low pressure sits across the Bering here. It is trying to dig into this area of high pressure. The main flow here dropping south across the North Pacific and then racing across the North Pacific waters 90 to 105 knots or so, and then jumping into the northern and central Rockies around Colorado and sending itself north again. Northerlies then across most of Alaska will be the rule, around 50 to 60 knots. You can see that northwesterly flow about 15 to 20 here at 9,000 feet. Low pressure sitting across the eastern Gulf has faster winds on the south side coming into southeast around 15 to 40 knots, and northerlies for most of the Bering Sea. No big change in that at 3,000 feet. Low pressure is a little bit further north here, just west of Sitka, with a north and westerly flow coming across south central. Northerlies for the Bering and northwesterlies for the central and northern interior, as strong as 10 to 25 knots. Most of that right around coastal communities of the Chukchi and the Beaufort communities there. The turbulence shows up here. We have some considerable moderate around the Chukchi coast and the outside of Kotzebue Sound and around the Bering Strait below 4,000 feet, also around the Barren Islands, and certainly for a large part of southeast tomorrow. Watch for some thumps and bumps throughout the day. A little bit more widespread isolated moderate pushing north and south out of southeastern Alaska.
Where did all these constellations come from?
Welcome to Stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dehne Regis, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory. We're here to help you find your way around the sky tonight.
Hey Dehne, we have something special to talk about this week.
Oh, would that be another planetary close encounter or perhaps a super rare eclipse?
Well, none of those actually. Well, a young viewer of our show visited my planetarium a while back, and his name is Henry. He asked me this question: where did all these constellations come from? I thought that would be a great theme for this week's episode.
You're absolutely right. Well, Henry, we're going to answer your question right here on Stargazers. Where did all the sky pictures come from, and who came up with them?
Let's show you. For thousands of years, our ancestors have looked up at the night sky and wondered what it all was. Even as recently as 100 years ago, before the proliferation of streetlights, if you went outside on a clear moonless night, you could see thousands of stars right from your backyard.
Without a scientific explanation of what the stars were, many ancient cultures thought the stars were divine. Each star was considered a god, fixed in position relative to the others, appearing to rise in the east and set in the west night after night.
Imagine how magical, mysterious, and awesome the heavens must have seemed to our ancestors. As a person went from youth to old age, they would see the same stars in the same locations year after year, the same at age 5 as at age 50. And the sky seemed so high above them that the stars were unreachable, as if they were attached to the inside of a large crystalline sphere with us at the center.
And this crystalline sphere would appear to rotate around the Earth, again, with us at the center, making the stars appear to rise in the east and set in the west. This repetitive motion of the stars was very predictable, so many ancient people used the night sky as a primitive clock.
That's right, because not only was the daily motion of the stars repetitive, but over the course of a year, the stars you could see would gradually change. But 365 days later, the same stars you saw a year ago would appear in the same place. So if you look up at the stars after sunset on your birthday, you'll see the same stars in the same place every birthday for as long as you live.
The human brain likes to make order out of chaos. Although the distribution of the stars in the night sky is random, your brain immediately wants to make patterns out of the brightest stars.
So, as our ancestors spent their evenings gazing at the stars, they would play a game of celestial connect the dots, making patterns both big and small that represented objects, animals, or people. We call these patterns constellations.
There are currently 88 official constellations in modern astronomy. The constellations you can see depend on where on Earth you live. For example, people who live in Australia can see some of the same stars that we can see from North America, but not all of them, and vice versa.
Australians can see the Southern Cross, but only a few of us in North America can. North Americans can see Ursa Major, the Great Bear, but New Zealanders cannot. The only place on Earth where you can actually see all 88 constellations is at the equator.
So, as people around the world played connect the dots with the stars, they would create fanciful stories about each of the constellations they created. Many of these stories were used to pass down cultural values of morality or tell stories about love, courage, or honor.
These constellation stories were handed down from generation to generation. So, constellations came from stargazers like you.
So, great question, Henry. If you have a question or topic idea for the show, feel free to write to us at our website, stargazersonline.org.
In the meantime, you can always create your own constellations out of the stars you can see every night as you keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your sea surface temperatures. Notice that the bright red colors here are indicating sea surface temperatures that are above anywhere from 15 to about 17 degrees C. A lot of that found generally north of Sitka to Yakutat and certainly in Prince William Sound and off the Kenai Fjords and parts of Bristol Bay. We still have warm waters inside of Kotzebue Sound. You can see the cooler waters remaining from the most recent ice loss here north of the Beaufort, but the ice itself is way to the north and we still have warm waters in the Chukchi. Here's a look at the ice now as of this afternoon, August 22nd. You can see ice is easily 200 nautical miles or more north of Utqiagvik and Kaktovik here. The blue areas, of course, the marginal ice zone, less than 80% concentration. Greater than 80%, of course, is in the white, so no significant change from the last couple of days. I encourage you anytime to look at the seasonal outlook from the Alaska Sea Ice Program. You can find that at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. On to the wind and the waves in southeast. You can see we're going to have some gustier conditions outside of Gustavus. Generally north of Cross Sound, winds coming in from 30 to 35 knots from the east and northeast, more of a southerly flow south of Port Alexander, and southeasterlies coming up the inside passage, 5 to 8 knots there, northerlies across the Lynn Canal. Those are going to come up from the south as we get into your Saturday, gust to 35 knots there, winds still holding around 15 to 20 knots in a variable direction for central and southern parts of the inside passage, and westerly onshore flow from Yakutat all the way down to Clarence Strait, 15 to 25, 7 to 13 foot seas there on Saturday. For Prince William Sound, northwesterlies inside and outside, really, 15 knots or so, looking at 3 feet on the inside, 13 feet on the outside. Westerlies coming across the Barren Islands, 20 to about 25 knots. You're looking at 5 to 11 foot seas, the highest of which will be in the western Gulf, of course, and look for a light southwesterly flow coming up Cook Inlet. That'll become a little bit more of a northerly push as we get into Saturday. That westerly flow continues across the north and western Gulf. Northwesterlies over Prince William Sound, 10 knots with 2 to 5 foot seas. On the inside, generally looking at those 5 to 6 footers as you get outside of Hitchinbrook entrance, though, so watch for conditions to change there. As we look at Bristol Bay, Friday, 15 knots with a westerly flow, 3 foot seas there, north and westerly winds coming over the Alaska Peninsula. Slightly higher winds across Kodiak Island, southwesterlies about 20 knots or so in Shelikof Strait, westerlies producing 10 foot seas east of Kodiak and AKwx. For Saturday, northwesterlies all the way down Bristol Bay, down toward Cold Bay and Sand Point. That's going to bring us 10 to 20 across the Bering Sea coast, 15 knots for most areas across the Gulf, and southwesterlies as you get into Shelikof Strait with a 3 foot sea, 7 foot seas heading down the peninsula. For the chain, 15 knots will do the trick no matter where you are. It looks like northerlies across the Bering Sea coast, bringing us 3 to about 5 foot seas from east to west. You'll see slightly higher seas south of the Pacific coastline, 6 to 8 footers there with a northerly flow. Again, you guessed it, 15 knots. For Saturday, not much of a change. High pressures in control way out to the west, and that light northerly flow is drifting over the islands. The heaviest winds will be out across the east, and we get 10 to 15 knots for your location. Look for about 4 to 5 foot seas in most areas there, with 4 to 5 foot seas as well for the Pacific coast. For the west coast, northerlies, a little bit of a tighter flow here, 20 to 25 knots, looking at 6 to 7 foot seas generally north of Macquarie and Nunivak Island into St. Paul and St. George, 20 knots, 4 foot seas there on Friday. As we get into Saturday, that diminishes just a little bit in most areas, exceptions being north and south of Etoll Strait and Macquarie there, 20 knots with a 4 to 5 foot sea. St. Paul, St. George, and St. Matthew all looking at 4 to 5 foot seas with a 15 knot wind, and northerlies inside of Norton Sound, 15 knots and 3 foot seas for you. For the North Slope, northwesterlies coming into the coast at 15 to 20, looking for 5 to 7 foot seas there. Northerlies coming down the Chukchi, anywhere from 20 knots, 6 to 7 foot seas again, so watch for a little bit of surf. Northwesterlies shift into the region on Saturday. Look for a stronger westerly flow as we start up the weekend here. 8 to even 6 to 8 foot seas, let's say, from Prudhoe Bay to Kaktovik, all in that westerly 20 to 25 knot wind and over open water. Recapping tonight's weather, low pressure sitting across the eastern Gulf at 986 millibars. The front is working north and east into coastal areas of southeastern Alaska. It's bringing quite a bit of rain to the region, much needed precipitation, but it is keeping south central dry tonight. A few showers over Kodiak and probably just outside of Prince William Sound. Light rain north of the Alaska Range, and areas of rain and turning to snow across the Brooks Range there, and maybe enough so this afternoon and tonight for up to about 4 inches in some places in the higher terrain and east of the Dalton Highway. For Friday, watch for that northerly push to continue. Low clouds, rain, and drizzle will keep things under IFR conditions for the north and parts of the west coast. Low pressure drifts into southeast at 992 millibars. Showers continue for you on Saturday. Dry weather for the most part around south central as we start up the weekend. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.